First of all, it's nice to see so many of you turned out tonight on a rather cold, wet night here in Dunoon. Evening, ladies and gentlemen, and those that are watching these hustings live on the Democracy Live Scotland Facebook page just now, and those that will be listening on the local radio station, Dunoon Community Radio. Thank you very much to them and to the Dunoon Observer for organising tonight's hustings and this wonderful event here at the Burgh Hall. Now, we are lucky to have tonight candidates of such high calibre who will be fighting it out to represent Argyll Boot in this general election. Make no bones about it, these candidates have operated at the highest levels, and a lot of them already know how the Westminster bubble actually owns and operates. Now, they might have differences, you might have differences with them, but they all have the one thing at heart: they all want to get to the bottom of our problems here in Kells. So please tonight, be respectful to our candidates. Now, before we do start this evening, let's just remind ourselves that this is Dunoon, not the Houses of Parliament, so we will all be respectful to one another tonight. The questions might get a little heated, but that's understandable considering the divisive nature of this general election. Now, before we start tonight, as I said, there are some rules this evening. It is the night where you have your say, so please, when someone is speaking, let them speak. And on that point, in the words of the now ex-Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, I think you know what's coming, don't you? There'll be no chuntering from a sedentary position tonight. If you have something to say, raise your hand, wait for us to get a microphone to you, and then not just us in the hall, but everyone watching live and listening will be able to hear your questions. Now, there are a couple of other rules laid down tonight by the Dunoon Observer, the organisers of tonight's hustings. No questions or comments, please, about the candidates' private lives. None of that will be tolerated at all tonight. As I say, we are streaming these proceedings live, so legally that will not happen tonight. Questions tonight should be on those matters reserved for Westminster. Remember, this is not a local election, though some questions will be allowed that directly deal with devolved issues. Okay? Just so you be clear on that. I shall also ask tonight of our candidates, after many of us have watched, some in disbelief, at the proceedings and behaviour in the Houses of Parliament recently, that our candidates tonight should also be respectful to each other. No personal attacks, no talking over each other. You'll all be given equal time to respond tonight, so make good use of it. We also have a selection of questions tonight to put to our candidates from the editor of the Dunoon Observer. I should put those to you as the night goes on, but time is really against us. I'll give you questions that are raised. You may choose to speak for less or take the entire 2 minutes. So, let me introduce you to tonight's candidates. And on my far left, for Labour, would you please give a round of applause for Ria Barnes. Also to my left, for the Conservative Party, Gary Mulvaney. To my right, Brendan O'Hara from the SNP. And once again, Alan, forgive me, to my far right, Alan Reid from the Liberal Democrats. So without any further ado, let's get tonight's hustings underway and let's get acquainted with each of our candidates. Starting with the Labour candidate, Ria Barnes. You now have 2 minutes of our audience's undivided attention.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending this evening. I know it's not the best of weather to be coming out. For the record, I must admit that I'm fairly new to this, so please bear with me. I'm here today to offer a fresh alternative to the current establishment, one that will see people's welfare placed at the heart of government in Westminster. I also come here today to hear from you, the community, as I believe that all too often politicians love to talk, but they don't remember to listen to people. I come from Tunnel and I am honoured to have the opportunity to stand for my area. I love my home and I desperately want to see our communities prosper and thrive. I believe that to represent an area, the person should have a vested interest in it, so when the system fails, they understand because they are part of it. I am part of the community and I feel affected and frustrated when things don't work. In the future, I hope to raise a family in Argyll and Bute, and I want to fight to make sure it is a place that works for everyone. The past years have been very difficult for us all, and I have seen people become increasingly divided by matters such as Brexit and independence, and I'm tired of it. While these debates rage on, ordinary people are struggling and our communities are withering away, terrorised by austerity. It doesn't have to be this way. We can turn the situation around. Our people and communities should come first, and nobody in a civil and just society should want for the necessities of life. To believe otherwise is just wrong, in my opinion. In this election, we have proposed forward-thinking and people-centred policies that will bring hope and investment to our communities. A £10 living wage, a fantastic Green Deal that will bring skilled employment to the area, a £70 billion investment to Scotland's people and communities, public services, and an increase in funding for the NHS, and this is just to name a few. Another world is possible, and by voting Labour on December the 12th, we'll be choosing a forward-thinking and more caring type of politics that puts people at its heart. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now our Conservative candidate, Gary Mulvey.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think anybody looking at politics today would say it's a god-awful mess. We've got 2 years of absolute shambles. What I'd like to say tonight is we can stop all this. There's 3 things I think are important in this election. The first thing is we need to stop Nicola Sturgeon and our drive to Indy 2. The second thing is we need to get Brexit sorted, get it done. And the third thing, which is probably the most important thing, is to heal and unify our country and move on to people's priorities. In a sense, get back to normal. And there's only one way that we can actually achieve that, and that's by the election of a Conservative majority government. In Argyll and Bute, what we saw last time in 2017, and it's virtually the same runners and riders as before, it was a 2-horse race. There was 1,300 votes between myself and Brendan, and again in Argyll and Bute, it is a 2-horse race. You know, Nicola and the SNP have made this general election all about independence, and she's been quite open about it. This is about independence for her. And even though the SNP have been a decade in power in Scotland, this is their obsession. And we need to say no means no. And Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP do need to listen to the Scottish people. Jeremy Corbyn, quite frankly, cannot be trusted on the union. He's admitted himself that he's not a unionist. And the policy has gone through umpteen evolutions from blocking a referendum to not in the first term, to not part of the priorities, to now it seems to be sometime in the 21st of May 21. Unionists, we need to unite, we need to come together, and we need to defeat the SNP in Argyll and Bute. Thank you very much. And now for the SNP, Brendan O'Hara.
Thank you, Chair. In my mind, there's no doubt that this is one of the most important general elections in a decade, in decades. And there's 2 things will dominate it. One will be Brexit, and the other issue in Scotland will be about Scotland's future and who gets to decide Scotland's future. In my 4.5 years as your Member of Parliament, I have, in accordance with the wishes of the majority of this constituency, opposed Brexit. And I can guarantee, if re-elected, I will continue to oppose Brexit, because there is no such thing as a good Brexit for Argyll and Bute. Our people will be diminished culturally, socially and economically. Our businesses, whether it's shellfish industry, the tourism industry, the farming industry, will all suffer as a result of Brexit. And we will be unable to attract those people from across Europe that we need to come and live and work and invest and raise a family in Argyll and Bute when we are cut off from the rest of the European Union. And Brexit also goes to the heart of our NHS, because Brexit threatens our National Health Service like nothing has done before. Because President Trump is clear in saying that he will be looking for a UK-US trade deal post-Brexit in which the NHS and access to our National Health Service is included. So today Scotland stands at a crossroads, and we have to decide what kind of country we want to be and what the values of that country are. Are we to be part of an isolationist UK, cut adrift from Europe?
I must
can we
tonight,
be
because
an
time is
independent
against us,
European nation?
Brendan,
That's your choice.
I must ask you tonight, because time is against us, we have to have these proceedings tonight done by a certain time, and 2 minutes unfortunately means 2 minutes, whether it's a candidate that's never been here before or indeed our MP from Westminster. But thank you, Brendan O'Hara. And now, for our final of our 4 candidates tonight, it's Alan Reid of the Liberal Democrats.
We can stop Brexit, and if you elect a Liberal Democrat government, then Brexit stops on the 13th of December. I was the local MP here for 14 years. In most of that time, I was able to concentrate on delivering better services here to Argyll and Bute. Unfortunately, for the past 6 or 7 years, we've been bogged down endlessly discussing Brexit and independence. Now, if you vote Tory or SNP in this election, then those endless discussions will go on and on and on. Don't for a minute think that voting Tory will get Brexit done. That's all a con. The withdrawal agreement is only the first step. What will follow from that will be long, drawn-out discussions that, judging by international comparisons, will take about 10 years to conclude. But we can stop Brexit on 13th of December. An election victory for the Liberal Democrats will give us a Democrat mandate to stop Brexit. Respected economists have calculated that Brexit will cost the country £50 billion. Stopping Brexit, as well as saving all that money, will also rob the SNP of the excuse that they use for yet another independence referendum. Liberal Democrats want a free and open society where we work together and trade freely throughout the UK and throughout Europe. We don't want to put up the barriers that the other parties want to put up. We should be concentrating on the real issues. The real issue confronting us is climate change and the threat of environmental catastrophe. Let's concentrate on that and not bogged down in constitutional discussions. Vote Liberal Democrat for a brighter future.
Thank you very much, Alan. Moving on now to Gary Mulvaney from the Conservative Party. Again, these questions from the editor of the Dunoon Observer. Gary, distant relationship with the truth. Is he fit for high office?
At the end of the day, it's the people of the UK that will make that judgment, and and simply what they've got to do is they've got to look at the same as the candidates in offer here. They've got to make those individual judgments. And in terms of Prime Minister, obviously there's a Prime Ministerial debate tonight between Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson. That those are the two people that can be Prime Minister, and people will make up their mind. None of us in this room are perfect. Not you, Chair, not me, certainly. And it's not for me to judge, others' qualities and their strengths and weaknesses. And people will look at the two characters and decide who do they trust to be the Prime Minister of the UK, who do they trust to run the economy, who do they actually trust with the security of the United Kingdom. And I'd be really, really worried if it's Jeremy Corbyn, because we know what his friends are like.
Okay. So it's a yes from you. But in fairness, he has been caught lying several times now. Misleading millions on the sides of buses, details on the trade talks. Even Nigel Farage of the Breakfast Party, he said he no longer trusts Boris Johnson.
I think he's an excellent candidate for Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Gary Mulvaney. I said these questions are from the Dunoon Observer, from Gordon Nish, the editor. And the next question tonight, Brendan O'Hara from the SNP. Now, in the spirit of Ronnie Smith, of the Dunoon Ferry Action Group, who sadly passed away just a few weeks ago. I think this question is actually quite apt for tonight. In its 10 years of power, the SNP has failed to sort out Dunoon ferries, leaving us with a second-rate and frankly embarrassing service. If the SNP can't manage that, how can we trust them to manage the country?
Here. I think there's two parts to the question. I'll deal with the latter part first and come back to the second part. I think the SNP are running the country very well. I think there's no doubt after 12 years in power and still sitting at 42% of the vote in the opinion polls, the people of Scotland say the SNP are running the country very well. Now, I'm not going to pretend that there is not an issue here in Dunoon, particularly around ferries, but let's be clear, on this panel there is nobody, and no one should pretend otherwise, there's no candidate here has the power to make the Scottish Government act on ferries, because ferries is entirely and completely devolved. CMAR and CalMac are answerable to Transport Scotland, and of course, as in my 4.5 years as Member of Parliament for Argyll and Bute, I have been made abundantly clear of the difficulties that the current service proposes. I normally, when I'm coming over from Helensburgh Drive, I have on occasion been on the passenger ferry, and I share your concerns. They are not fit for purpose, and I will support anybody and any move who's trying to get a far better service with bigger boats, more reliable boats, which can carry a passenger service safely and reliably better than it currently is. But as I say, this is entirely a matter for the Scottish Government and not a matter that anyone in this platform can give you an answer to or a promise that anyone can make and honestly fulfil.
Thank you very much, Brendan Hart for the SNP. So get ready with your questions. We're going to be sending a mic around shortly. If you've got a question, get ready to put your hand in the air. But finally, for the moment, the last question from the editor of the Dunoon Observer, this time for Alan Reid from the Liberal Democrats. Now, Alan, after the 2010 election, the Liberal Democrats entered into a coalition with the Conservatives, making you a member of the government. Is that likely to happen again this time?
Well, I think it's very likely that I'll be a member of the government because the Liberal Democrats will be forming the government of the country after this election. But I can assure you we will not be forming a coalition government with either Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn as the Prime Minister. I mean, I noticed that Gary's only defence of Boris Johnson was that he wasn't quite as bad as Jeremy Corbyn, and will certainly be having nothing to do with those two. In the run-up to 2010, we had said that we would form a coalition with whichever of the other two parties got the most seats and votes. We kept that promise. This time we're making the promise we wouldn't form a coalition with either of them, and we'll keep that promise too.
Thank you very much. Alan Reid, everyone. Now it's a chance for you to put your questions to the candidates. We will be taking some more questions from the Dunoon Observer a bit later on in proceedings. If you have a question tonight, please raise your hand in the air. We'll get to you as quickly as we can, but please don't start talking until we have a microphone on you so that we can hear you in the hall and hear you for those that are watching live just now via Facebook Live. So I must admit, this lady over here in the pink jumper or cardigan did have her hands up before anyone else. If you'd like to give us your name, you can tell us where you're from if you like as well, and which one of the candidates you'd like your question to go to, but we will open it up to all our candidates today.
My name's Barbara Schmidt. I live in Dunoon. I'd like to ask all the candidates, but maybe first Rhea, where the candidates stand vis-a-vis the NHS.
Okay, so Rhea, Labour Party, NHS, where do you stand?
We're going to put that front and centre into our policies.
Microphone.
I think. Are we good? Yeah. We're putting that front and centre of our policies. We're going to put funding into the NHS, and a lot of it, nurses, doctors, and all the staff have suffered for too long on low wages, not having enough equipment as well. Wards are being shut down. It's not acceptable, and we will fix it with additional funding.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Alan Reid, Liberal Democrats, NHS here in Scotland. Liberal Democrats' point of view, your point of view on this?
Well, it's a devolved matter to the Scottish Government, so as Brendan said on ferries, we can't make any promises tonight as individual candidates. But so far
what would you like to see?
I think the most important issue facing the NHS in Scotland, which the Scottish Government should be dealing with, is, I think, the mental health service. That mental health has lagged behind treatment of physical health for many years, and so much more resources need to go into the treatment of mental health. I mean, here in NHS Highland we have the disastrous situation where some children can wait for 2 years to get medical treatment. It's just not acceptable. We need more staff allocated to mental health. And it's important also to point out that not treating mental health affects the whole rest of the health service. It puts a greater burden on accident and emergency, it puts a greater burden on GPs, and it puts a greater burden on the police as well. So certainly mental health would be our priority in Scotland.
There you go. So mental health and more nurses from Alan Reid, more money from the Labour Party. Gary Mulvaney, Conservatives' point of view of the NHS. It doesn't have to necessarily be about Scotland. It would be nice if you could give us an insight into that. But just in general, the NHS, what is the policy going into this election?
I think every party's policy on the NHS is about putting more resources in, and the Conservatives are no different. And our manifesto that will be launched over the weekend will pledge to do exactly that. You're right enough to say it is a devolved issue, and I think it's the most important public service that we've actually got, and we've got great quality of professionals within the NHS. The thing that really disappoints me is under the last 12 years, we've got it so wrong. I mean, waiting times haven't been hit, the target hasn't been hit for the last 12 years. Nearly 1 in 5 cancer patients wait more than 2 months. And I can't understand, it's a devolved issue, it's a Scottish Government issue, why after that length of time we can't have actually sorted out these things. And I know that, the SNP's argument is, well, it's better than it is in England. And that's fine to an extent, but they set the targets, they're their own targets, and they haven't met their own targets. And it's people's health that is suffering in terms of waiting times. So I would like to think that as an MP, as a potential MP, there's nothing I can do about the health service other than lobby. But I'd like to think that the SNP would actually start to improve the health service.
Okay. Brendan O'Hara, NHS in Scotland better than England?
I think but by almost any measure you would say that it is. I'm keen, and I will defend the Scottish Government's record in the National Health Service. I absolutely think we've done. If you have a real terms cut your budget of 8% in less than a decade, things are going to get tough. And the Scottish Government have been doing, I think, an exceptional job in the face of a huge real terms cut. But I want to bring this back to what I think is an even bigger and more important issue facing the National Health Service. And that is the consequences of Brexit on the National Health Service. Because if Brexit happens and the United Kingdom are scrambling around looking for a free trade deal with the United States of America, then you can bet your bottom dollar that they will be in there on a free trade deal looking for access to a National Health Service. Now, don't take my word for it.
It's not on the table.
Donald Trump, June 2019, said, when you're dealing with trade, everything is on the table. So the National Health Service or anything else or a lot more than that. Now, he was quickly quietened down by Theresa May, but not before the US ambassador to the United Kingdom on the Andrew Marr show the following week said, I think the entire economy in a trade deal, all things that traded would be on the table, and when asked if that meant the National Health Service, he said, I would think so. That's the problem. That's the major problem for the National Health Service as we know it. It's been sold off to US drug companies as part of a trade deal. And when you are desperate for a trade deal, you'll trade anything.
So don't believe a word the Tories tell you in the National Health Service. It's up for sale after Brexit, and the National Health Service will be sold off to the American drug companies. They both say it. The Tories have said it, and Trump has said it. And that's the danger.
Okay, hopefully that has gone some way to answering your question tonight. Next question from the floor, please. Let's choose the gentleman up there in the aisle with his hand up in the air, get the glasses on. Yeah, keep your hand there with the blue jacket on. Let's get a question from you tonight. If you could just wait until we get a microphone to you, that'd be great. And if you wouldn't mind, give us your name, tell us where you're from if you like, and which candidate you want the question to go to, but we will open it up, as I said, to the whole table.
I'm Lindsay Walker from Strathclyde, and I would like to address a question to Brendan. Most of the people in this room have friends and family south of the border. 80% of Scottish exports go south of the border. How do the Scottish National Party justify coming away from our friends and family in England and moving closer to Europe, where the culture is different, the language is different? I would like to know how they justify coming away from the Union of the United Kingdom and justifying going into Europe with its different culture.
So, Brendan.
Let me be absolutely clear from the start. I think cultural diversity enriches us all. I think every single one in this room has benefited from people being able to move from the northernmost part of Shetland to the southernmost tip of Greece for the last 40 years, the last 30 years, has enriched us all. We need people to come and live and work and invest and raise a family in Argyll and Bute. And personally, I don't care if they come here with Polish children, with Greek children, with French children or German children. I just want them to come here and I want them to be part of our community. Now, we never agreed to be taken out of the European Union. We never acceded to the United Kingdom government pulling us out of Europe. And that's why, if anything, the argument for Scottish independence becomes even greater, because we've got to get away from having things done to us rather than making decisions for ourselves. And that's what the crux of this is. And it's not about culture, it's not about being cut off from other people. We have been taken out of the European Union against our will. If you want to talk family, I've got my sister and her husband and my nieces and nephews live in Holland, and they've lived in Holland for the last 15, 20 years. Now, I want to be able for my nieces and nephews to come to Scotland to see me without having to think about applying for a visa, or do they stand in a different queue to get into Scotland when they come, or my children when they go and see their cousins in Holland. I mean, it is such a backward, retrograde step, and this is about Scotland saying enough is enough.
What about my children that live in England?
We're fed up of having things done to us by others, and it's about time we took things on our own hands and decided our own future.
You've had your 2 minutes. As I said, things might get a bit heated in here tonight, but please wait. We'll get a microphone to you, then everyone can hear what you have to say. It's the best way to do it tonight, and things will get obviously a bit heated. So, aligning Scotland more with Europe than the rest of the UK. Gary Mulvaney, Conservative Party, what do you think of that question?
Well, Lindsay, I think it's a very, very valid question. I think that the point about immigration, is well made. I do believe in immigration. I do believe in cultural diversity. I do believe it does add to our culture and our heritage and all these things. What I cannot understand is why there is a desire, a compulsion, or obsession to break up a 300-year union that's been the United Kingdom, and create borders and differences between us, where we've worked, probably the strongest and best union that there's ever been, both a political and economic union. So I just don't get the drive for independence, and certainly I'll be dead clear. If you elect me as your MP,
I will never, ever, ever support Scottish independence.
Ria Barnes of the Labour Party, taking Scotland out of the UK, putting it in Europe, will it cause cultural problems?
I understand the frustration of many people with their concerns with independence, but I'm for less borders, not more. I understand many people in this room will have family down south. And our trade as well. I don't want to see that affected, but I do respect people's right to self-determination as well. In terms of our relationship with Europe as well, the world's a more cosmopolitan place now as well. We need to understand that we are intermeshed with Europe as well, and we can't get away from that. I openly welcome immigration. I think it's a great thing. We have an ageing population here in Argyll and Bute, so care is such an important thing, and it will become more important. We've got a shortfall right now of 40,000 nurses in this country, so we need people to come in and help fill these vacancies. I think I was looking the other day that the Office of National Statistics estimates that 3.3 million workers in the UK's tourism industry, of those, overseas workers account for 16% of that. But that kind of masks the reality of what's going on regionally as well. So using London for an example, more than half of their workers into the tourism industry are EU nationals. So we really cannot break away from that. I think it's important to understand that, in my opinion anyway.
Thank you, Ria. Alan Reeves of the Liberal Democrats. So taking Scotland out of the UK, aligning it closer to Europe, what happens then with our friends, family, south of the border?
Well, that's a very important point. The reality is that friends, family south of the border would have a hard border with customs posts and tariffs between Scotland and England. That's the reality. I mean, the SNP plan to take Scotland out of the UK, it's complete and utter bonkers. I mean, just let's look at the reality of what it would mean. I mean, Scotland, as part of the UK, benefits through the Barnett formula that public spending on our services in Scotland is 25% higher per head than in England. We discussed the NHS earlier. Yes, our NHS in Scotland is better than the NHS in England. That's because the Barnett formula gives us much more money to spend on it. Now, the reality of leaving the UK is that public spending in Scotland would have to be cut by £2,000 for every person in the country. I've been in plenty of panels with Brendan. I've never yet heard him say once what services he would cut in Scotland to make up that shortfall of £2,000 per person. That's the reality. Voting SNP means you're voting to cut the NHS, or cut education, cut every public service in Scotland by £2,000 per head. It's daft, it's crazy, it's ridiculous.
Thank you. It didn't take long for it to heat up in here tonight, did it? Okay, hands in the air. Who's got the next question tonight? I will come back to you, the gentleman that spoke earlier on. I'll just let you calm down for another couple of minutes, get another few questions in, and then I want to hear what you had to say. Anyone? No, we will get to him. Anyone on this side of the audience that wants to speak? So the gentleman there that just stuck his hand up with the, I was going to say the gentleman with the black on, but they're both wearing black, so let's go for the gentleman at the back first.
Good evening. I'm relatively new to Dunoon. I came here in June. I absolutely love it here. Okay. Now, Ria, you talked about prosperity. I've got my son in the grammar school. He's 16, and I've got a 23-year-old. Now, Brendan, you said that nobody on the panel there could make any difference about the ferries, okay? For Dunoon and Argyll to be really to have a prosperous future, we do need to rely on the ferry services. I'd maybe even like to ask if the panel members actually know how much a 10-journey book plus a 10-journey passenger would actually cost. I wonder if you would know that.
Okay. So if you could get to the point of your question.
Okay, my point is that you say that it's not, you can't make the difference. I cannot believe you would be MPs, and that you can't make that difference. It's such an important point to get these ferries working properly, and a fairness so as we're not having to spend fortunes and our young people can actually go over to Glasgow and get work.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I get where you're coming from on this. Not so much of a question, more of a quiz tonight for our panel. 10 car and driver plus passenger. Alan Reid, any idea?
There's no driver ticket.
So I think we're talking Western Ferries here.
Western Ferries. A car driver, it's...
Okay, so Brendan O'Hara from the SNP.
It's about £68 because I have to admit that I now get the OAP rate.
Thank you for being so honest.
Living in Helensburgh, I drive here all the time, so I've never actually taken a 10-book ticket.
It's the equivalent of the price of petrol. And Gary Mulvaney, I think we're kind of giving away the answer anyway, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm using the Brendan O'Hara defence as well here.
Okay, and Ria, I'm not sure how many times you've travelled on our ferry service, so it might actually be unfair to ask this question of you tonight.
Actually, it's quite a good question because I grew up in Dunoon, and I have family out in the island, so I'm used to using the ferry services, and I understand your frustration, sir, I really do. I have been, during this campaign, using public transport, and that's a conscious decision on my part, just for the fact as well, cost-wise, I'm a student, I can't afford to drive. Also as well, I wanted to make a better impact upon the environment as well and try and use these services. So I did actually come over on the ferry tonight, and I think it was a £4.50 for a return for me. So I do get it, I understand the cost because I use these services. And I was talking to some young people on it, and I said, look, why? I heard them talking before they got on the ferry, and they said it's rubbish. And I said, well, can you tell me what would fix it? And they said, we need better boats, bigger boats, more reliable boats that can sail in bad weather.
I think, in fairness, we have kind of covered this bit of the topic a bit earlier on, and I don't want to get too bogged down in just the ferries now. But thank you all for being so honest.
I do understand your frustration, sir, and I also want to hear...
Yes, I think we know your answers to that, so thank you very much. And I'm glad, now if you mind sitting down please, I'm glad that you've got lots of positive things to say about Dunoon and Cowell and Argyll and Bute, thank you very much for saying those tonight. Now, back over to this side, the whole piece, gentleman with the scarf on, the blue scarf sitting there with the, I don't know where I can describe it as a beard. Just so we know which one, that's all. If you'd like to tell us where you're from, please, I'll give you your name.
Yes, I'm from Dunoon, and thanks for taking the question tonight, panel. I would just like to ask the panel if they think it's fair that Scotland's First Minister and the third largest party in the United Kingdom is denied a platform to promote her party to the general public, or do the public think that's a fair thing?
It's a good question. It's the reason why it's so busy in here tonight is no one's at home watching the other programme that's on. You're all here, which is good to see. So denied a platform tonight. Gary Mulvaney from Conservative Party. Nicola Sturgeon not there this evening.
Yeah, I mean it's a decision for ITV and BBC and the broadcasters, I suppose, Ofcom as well. Do I have a personal issue if she'd been asked to be on the programme? Not at all. The reason that she's on our leaflets is every time we put in our leaflet, our vote goes up. So get her on the TV. Delighted.
There you go. An honest answer from Gary Mulvaney from the Conservative Party. So, Alan Reid, Joe Swinson not invited neither.
Oh, I mean, SDV are an absolute disgrace. I mean, it's an insult to democracy. Joe Swinson and Nicola Sturgeon should both have been on the programme. Both are leading parties that are significant players in the House of Commons. And I mean, we have the very unfair first past the post system in this country, and STV are just reinforcing it by only inviting two parties on. I mean, we're a multi-party democracy. The old days of the two-party system are long gone, and STV and the BBC as well, they're both a disgrace. I mean, all the leaders of the four parties who are significant contingents in the House of Commons should all have been on.
Thank you very much, Now, Jeremy Corbyn will be there this evening. I imagine you've got it set on your recorder to record, and you'll be going home tonight to watch. But shouldn't the other parties have also been included tonight?
I agree with Alan. I think it is it's shocking because as much as I have my disagreements with the SNP on many regards and the Liberal Democrats, they should be included because they are both major parties and we're in a democracy and they should get a fair hearing as well.
Thank you very much. I'm sure, Brendan O'Hara from the SNP, you've got a lot to say on this. Scotland's First Minister, not represented tonight.
I can't say an awful lot more than what Alan and Lee have said. It's insulting, but not entirely unexpected, is it? You know, the arrogance with which the broadcasters treat smaller, as they see them, smaller parties is quite remarkable. Whilst British politics has moved on, Scottish politics has moved on light years ahead of that again. Somehow the UK national broadcasters are stuck in this two-party mindset. It's old-fashioned, it's lazy, and I think, is it any wonder that people are turning off the way that they are if the national broadcasters are so lazy and so ill-informed and so behind the curve that they can't see that things have gone far beyond out in the country. And what I would say to Alan is, as a former employee of STV, I have to defend, it's not STV, it's actually ITV, it's just been broadcast on STV. So I stand correct.
Thank you very much. And just before we go on to another question, Gordon, I wonder if you mind the gentleman there with it. You wait till we get your microphone. The gentleman with the green jumper won't interject all the way through, so he must have something important that he would like to say.
Ivan Gill, Hunters Key. On this particular point, isn't it really the case that as far as the election at Westminster is concerned, it's purely a case of whether or not they want Boris or whether they want Corbyn? And that's why television and what have you are only concentrating on those two parties. That certainly is just probably a one-horse race. To suggest that the election here is a two-horse race, in my opinion, is very presumptuous. I'd like to know, how the outsiders fancy their chances, because I don't like a sure bet.
Well, just before we hand the microphone back, so that we know who to ask the question to first, who would be the outsiders? Are you willing to say, or shall I just...
The comment was that it was a two-horse race. I don't believe it is a two-horse race, it's probably only a one-horse race. Okay. So there are three outsiders. Let's hear what the outsiders have to say about it.
Gary Mulvaney, Conservative Party, it's only a one-horse race here in Scotland.
I mean, I know we're doing well, but I don't think we're doing that well. But I think, essentially in our government, the question was posed about, I don't know whether it was Scotland or, I think every constituency is different. And I think one of the things that will be different in this election is, I think it will be hard for the pollsters to take a national opinion poll and then extrapolate that across 650 constituencies, because I think there's going to be individual debates within each constituency, individual issues, whether you've got a former MP that's maybe changed party, all these type of things will be different. In terms of a two-horse race here in Argyll and Bute, I will say this only once, but this is where I agree with Brendan. We're both on the same page here. It is a two-horse race, and it's a two-horse race on the basis of where we were the last time. Brendan secured a majority of just over 1,300 votes, and that was in 2007. And you've got the same runners and riders again, with the exception of Leah. So I do think it is very much a two-horse race. And if you even looked at the Scottish opinion polls, you'd see that, for example, the Conservative Party is well outpolling the likes of the Lib Dems. So, when I'm looking at it, it is very much a battle between the Conservatives and the SNP in this seat, and things like independence have come into this general election debate.
Alan Reid, the Liberal Democrats, it's only a two-horse race.
Well, we're all supposed to be polite in the panel tonight, so I won't describe any of my opponents as horses.
Fair enough. We went from a one-horse race to two-horse race to three-horse race. Brendan,
over the last 32 years, only two parties have won this constituency. That's the Liberal Democrats and the SNP.
Now, the Liberal Democrats, we did have we've had one bad result here in this constituency in the last 32 years, but we've gone up again in the national polls, and the national polls now have us at the same level as they were when I was first elected for the seat in 2001. So given the level that we're at in the national polls, our Dylan Butte is well winnable by the Liberal Democrats. But parties can come from third and fourth place, and Brendan came from fourth place in 2015 and won. So just because parties were in first and second place in 2017 doesn't mean they're going to finish in first and second place in 2019. I would urge everybody there's three parties that have a chance in this election, and that's Conservative, SNP and Liberal Democrat. And so I would urge people to, each of these parties have three distinct views, so I would urge people to pick which view they want, vote for the candidate in the party they think, whose views they support, and see which one of us wins.
Thank you very much, Alan. Ria Barnes, I feel that it's only fair to throw back to you just now as well. Your horse isn't even in this race.
Well, it seems not compared to what the others are saying, but what's it my granny used to say, don't count your chickens before they hatch, but I think there is a desire for change, and again, as I said, I understand the frustrations with Brexit, I understand the frustrations with independence, but I just want to bring a fresh approach, a fresh alternative. You know, there's been 500 million that's been stripped out of the social security budget in Scotland. I was speaking to someone the other day, and we have one mental health specialist for the whole of Argyll and Bute. So things do have to change, and Labour are offering a really amazing forward-thinking manifesto, which I really, really hope people will have a look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ria. The last of our horse racing analogies tonight, Brendan O'Hara from the SNP. Is yours the only horse in this race?
Absolutely not. And I think it's interesting to note that had the Dunoon Observer used the same criteria as ITV, then it would only been myself and Gary here, and I think it would have been a far, far more diminished debate for it. We need to hear other voices. We need to hear everyone's opinion. The people deserve to hear a plurality of voice, and I think that's what we've got here. And so hats off to the Dunoon Observer. They've done the right thing. ITV will certainly have not. And I think you've got to look at the likelihood, and that's all it is. If you look at the bookies' odds, the likelihood is that the top two places in this constituency will either be myself and Gary and myself. That's the likelihood. Now that's not to diminish or seek to do down any of the other candidates, but that's what the bookies are telling us, and that's what the likelihood is. And that's why it's almost a polarisation. You know, Gary saying Boris Johnson for Prime Minister, and the SNP saying it's time for Scotland to decide its own future. And that's the stark choice that awaits. So wake up, the nightmare on the 13th, or Friday the 13th, could be a Tory MP and a majority Tory Boris Johnson-led government, or we start that move to letting Scotland and the people of Scotland decide their own future. So the bookies have got it, I think, pretty correct, that this is between the SNP and the Tories for Argyll and Bute, and it's that important for Scotland's future that we get an SNP MP re-elected here.
So we'll see who gets it now. Okay, thanks for the there has been someone waving their cane for the past 5 minutes at the back, and I will get to everybody else. I will get to everyone else. But please, if you give us your name, where you're from.
My name's Ben Barr. I just want to ask the panel, is £80 billion worth it for HS2?
So would you mind repeating that question just one more time, just the last part of it?
Is the expenditure of £82 billion at the latest estimate on HS2 worth it to save 20 minutes off a journey from Birmingham to London?
It's not something that will directly affect us here, obviously, in this country, but it's a lot of money to spend. I think is what the point that you're making. Ria Barnes, HS2. I mean, we were talking about ferries a minute ago, but £82 billion
the train service?
Frankly, I thought it was when it was announced, it was a vanity project for the privileged few to be able to cut a couple of minutes off their journey. So that's my view on it personally.
Alan Reid of the Liberal Democrats. Now, if you are travelling backwards and forwards down south, this could be worth it, but 82 billion?
Well, it's not just about faster travel, it's about a capacity issue. If we're going to combat climate change, we have to get people off the roads and onto the trains. I do think this is money well spent, although it has to be said it comes out of the English bloc, so it's effectively the English taxpayer that's paying for this because it comes out of the English bloc of spending. And the problem is the West Coast Main Line does have a capacity issue once you get beyond Crewe. And we need to get people off the road onto the train, and this is one way of doing it. If we're serious about tackling climate change, we have to spend more money on our railways. So I think that out of English spending, this is I think the English have chosen a good project to go ahead with.
Thank you very much, Alan. Brendan O'Hara from the SNP. That money well spent then, yeah?
You don't have to spend £82 billion to take 20 minutes off a journey. If you're serious about investing in railways, then you do it properly and you work out where, if you are serious about the UK, then how do you benefit everyone in the UK as opposed to how do you make it easier to get into London from what they call the north, but we actually think is pretty far south in terms of the UK. There's no benefit that I can see will come to Scotland or particularly to Argyll and Bute of HS2. I think it's a vanity project, I think it's ill-conceived, and I cannot see how £82 billion to reduce the travel time by less than half an hour can ever be seen as a common sense use of public money. It simply baffles me, and it's bogged down in problems and it's bogged down in local planning issues, and I wonder if we'll ever see a train run on the thing.
Okay, Gary Mulvaney, Conservative Party. Will we ever see trains running on HS2, and is that 82 billion worth it?
I mean, I think we'll have to wait and see. I mean, I think it's dead easy. It's dead easy to say 82 billion's a lot of money. But I think you need to look at the flip side as well. And if you're doing a business case, you'd have to look at what the business case is. Now, the business case isn't predicated, I assume, and I haven't seen the business case, I haven't read the business case, on the basis of 20 minutes off travel. It is on the basis of extra capacity. It is on the basis of actually getting more jobs out of London, and it will be on the basis, I assume, of gross value added. What additional wealth will that investment bring? Now, if somebody said to me, well, for £82 billion, actually, you're only going to get a return of 20 billion or 30 billion pounds in terms of additional wealth created, then clearly it's not a good use of resources. And I would accept that. But until you actually look at the whole equation and make that judgment, then I don't think any of us are in a position to say. I mean, I haven't read what the business case is. And I think that's one of the things that the Conservative government has already said. They want to have a look at it. And because the concern there is, and we've seen it with lots of other infrastructure projects, is that we seem to start off with one figure, and before we know it, it's multiplied and multiplied and multiplied. I mean, we saw that with the Scottish Parliament. It was 40 million it was supposed to cost, and it cost near 400 million. And we've seen that with so many other infrastructure projects. So I think that the government are quite right to pull this back in and stress test and do some sensitivity analysis round about exactly what is this going to deliver. And quite honestly, I'm in business, and if it doesn't deliver a return, then we shouldn't be doing it.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm keen to hear some more questions from you tonight. We will be taking some more questions as well from the Dunoon Observer a bit later on. I've heard from quite a lot of gentlemen so far this evening, and just one lady so far. So, ladies, good. There you are. Question from one of the ladies tonight. Tell you what, let's get the lady just underneath the curtains there with the maroon purple top on. Yeah. If you wouldn't mind standing up and tell us your name, and where, if you mind, whereabouts you're from as well.
I'm Deb Hill and I'm from Dunoon. We hear a lot nowadays about pragmatic politics, and I'd argue that it's not always about just getting things done, it's actually about doing the right thing. And if you're going to decide to do the right thing, it means that you actually need some values and some beliefs about your political systems that actually determine how you behave as a politician. And I would just like to know what would be your top 3 beliefs or values as a politician.
Oh, right, okay. Top 3 values as a politician tonight. Alan Reid, Liberal Democrats. What's your top 3?
Well, we want to see a fair society where everybody gets a chance to get on. We need to preserve our planet for future generations. And I want to see a world where everybody can get on together, a peaceful world with as few barriers as possible.
There you go, thank you. Alan, that's his top 3. Values and integrity. Brendan O'Hara from the SNP, what do you put up there as the top 3?
It's a fascinating question, and it should have been one of the ones that you asked at the beginning and we answered at the end, because it's actually quite a challenging question. I think in terms of values, I think it's honesty at its core. I think if you're not honest in this job, then you have a problem, because you have to be honest with people and you cannot just tell people what they want to hear to get yourself out of a sticky situation, as I've found quite often in the last 4.5 years. I think you've got to be honest and open and transparent. I think you have got to be true to yourself. I think that is absolutely key to everything you do, about being true to yourself. And I suppose that ties into having a sort of personal code of values and morals and beliefs which you don't shift just because the prevailing wind goes against you. And I think for me, having a code of a core belief and a faith is hugely important, and I find it as comforting as I do find it challenging in many ways. So I think honesty, integrity, being true to yourself, and having a belief system which you can fall back on. Did that answer the question? I'm not quite sure that it does, but
slightly more than 3. Yeah, slightly more than 3. Gary Mulvaney, what's your top 3 qualities?
I was just writing them down there. Integrity, honesty and accountability. I've been in politics for around about 17 years, and when I first came into politics, I came in on the basis that I would try the best for my community. I would try and achieve things that we all wanted to achieve, but I'd also be quite honest and upfront when it couldn't be done. And I remember being at a public meeting many years ago. I think it'd been a councillor probably around about a year or so, and we had somebody presenting from a community group. They'd come in to do a presentation, and they were actually very nervous. And we went round the table. She was asking questions of the 10 councillors in attendance. And they went round the various members, and actually I started to pick up the vibe that actually, that my fellow councillors were actually just telling her what she wanted to hear. And I thought, I'm not comfortable with that, so I'm just going to actually tell you what I think. And I told her what I thought, which was maybe not necessarily what she wanted to hear. But it probably marked me out as somebody that basically just said it as I see it. The good news story to that is a couple of years later, I actually married the woman who was actually the questioner in the audience. So it had a good and happy ending. And I think the final one is about accountability as well. You can judge all of us today. You can judge us on all of the leaflets and literature that comes out, and you'll make your own views. And equally, I'm quite happy to be judged in 3 or 4 years' time if I'm fortunate enough to be elected. And if you don't like what I've done, what I've said, etc., I'm comfortable with that accountability, because that's the way it should
Okay.
be.
Okay, so they did think he's here marriage in amongst that, would you? Ria Barnes, top 3 qualities you need to be a Labour candidate for Westminster?
I think for being in any kind of political position, honesty, first of all. You need to be honest to the people you serve. People need to understand and be able to know that you're going to tell them the truth, that, you know, especially when, I think as Brendan said, the wind does go against you as well, because that's the only way we'll get things done. I don't think up until this point there has been enough of that in politics. Integrity as well, you do have to have a code of conduct and what you believe in, and again, being able to stand up and say when, you know, be able to put across your point even when you feel like maybe like your party doesn't agree with you, or even public opinion goes against you. And accountability as well. We are a democracy. At the end of the day, we are accountable to every single one of you.
Thank you very much. Okay, some more questions from the floor, please. Let's see. I'm trying to see who I've missed the past few times. There is a gentleman with his hand at the back. I think it's a gentleman with a blue jumper on just now. He's had his hand up a few times. I think, yes, that's you. If you wouldn't mind standing up so we could actually see you as well, that'd be nice. Yeah, it was a gentleman. Oh, yes, right.
It's Gordon Blair.
Okay.
Given the dysfunctional nature of Westminster over the past 3 or 4 years, and given the comparative success of the devolved administrations, what's the view of the panel members with regard to proportional representation being introduced into the Westminster system? And if you're successful as an MP, once you retire as an MP, would you move your derriere from the green seats over to the red seats in the House of Lords? Would that be an option for you, or would you like to do that?
Proportional representation. Let's go back to you again, Ria Barnes.
I'm all for it. I think that it's worked fairly well here. I think the rest of the country could benefit. And as far as the House of Lords is concerned, I'm not a fan of the whole entity entirely. So no, I would not be seen dead in there.
Alan Reid from the Liberal Democrats. What do you make of that question?
Well, definitely it's proportional representation. It's the ordinary fair system. We have it for Holyrood, it works there. We have it for local councils, it works there. I mean, all the nonsense that the Tories kept on saying about proportional representation, it would lead to chaos and you wouldn't be able to get anything done. That's actually what the first past the post system was delivered at Westminster. So definitely proportional representation. And Gordon, my derriere did, as you know, leave the green benches, and nobody ever offered me a seat on the red benches.
Thank you very much, Alan Reid. Gary Mulvaney, proportional representation, it works, doesn't it?
Well, we did have a referendum back in, I think, 2011 on a version of proportional representation, and you know, the verdict was pretty much against that system at that time. I mean, I think that the UK would benefit from, you know, a clear, decisive government, and, you know, preferably, you know, one that's of, you know, of my party. But if not, then I think we do need actually, you know, a system that actually can actually deliver governance. And I think that's been the problem of the last 2 years. We've had an element of chaos as parties have fractured and MPs have gone from one party to another party to no party, and I don't think that's been helpful. And I think one of the problems that people have got with PR is the deal making, because the deal making is never part of the narrative of the manifesto, and I think that is a concern, because all the deal making happens after the results are announced, and they end up with potentially lots of people that are not particularly happy with the alliances. I'm sure some people in the Lib Dems weren't particularly happy when they went into alliance with the Conservatives. You know, so and these things happen, and that maybe wasn't what the people actually wanted. In terms of you know, green benches to red benches, I'm not a supporter of the House of Lords. I think it needs reformed, and I don't think that we can allow it to remain in its
the way it is just now. It's got far too many members. We need to get something that's better. And I think it's not a priority, but yeah, I think we need to get something that's better.
Thank you very much. Brendan O'Hara, your thoughts on that question?
I expect quite taking me Gary's idea about the problem of governments doing deals with other parties. I suppose if we had proportional representation, the country could have saved itself £1 billion from bunging the DUP, because that's exactly what it is. It's a deal done between a government party and a smaller party. And so it happens, Gary. It happens, and it's costing
SNP and the Greens, Brendan. Yeah.
Well, I'm very glad you mentioned that, and I won't get to that. We didn't pay the Greens £1 billion. Theresa May called an election she didn't have to call, believing she'd get a majority first past the post. It didn't arrive, and it cost the UK taxpayer £1 billion for the 10 votes for the DUP. Scotland has a proportional system which has been shown to work, and it works because it has to work. In order to get an effective government, it has to work. Compromise has to take place. Deals have to be done, but they're done openly and transparently, and they're done as a result of a democratic process. And so PR works, and Scotland has shown that it works. And I'm afraid the House of Lords, I'm afraid hell would freeze over before I went to the House of Lords. Hell would freeze over before I was asked to go to the House of Lords.
Okay, some more questions from the floor now. The gentleman who I asked to calm down a little while ago. I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. I'm going to come to you, then to the lady in the pink, and then to this lady at the front. So that's going to be the next couple of questions. If you can keep your questions not brief, but if we could get a few more in, I'd like to get some more in if possible. Please give us your name, tell us where you're from as well.
Dave Thompson, Dunoon. I'm 50 years old now. I've been perfectly happy being Scottish and British. I'm not a rabid unionist. But the thought of a hard border between myself and my children in England terrifies me. Does it terrify members of the panel?
Okay, good question. Alan Reid, terrified by this split that may happen?
Oh, it would be. It's a terrible prospect, because we just have to look at the implications. There would be tariffs crossing for goods, and particularly foodstuffs, crossing the border. So anything that we were importing into Scotland from England, because of the tariffs, would put food prices up, and our farmers would also suffer, because when they were trying to export into England, there would be tariffs placed on their products. So it would be a lose-lose situation.
Thank you very much. A lose-lose, Brendan O'Hara from the SNP, tariffs on food, etc.
A hard border at Carlisle can only take place if the United Kingdom goes through with the hardest of hardest Brexit. That's the choice that they have to make. If the United Kingdom remains in the single market and the customs union, even if it has to go through the madness of Brexit but retains single market customs union access, then there will be no hard border. But if the UK decides to go down this hard isolationist route that Boris Johnson seems to suggest he wants, then it will be the remainder of the UK who put that border up, not Scotland. So we have to, do we want a border between Scotland and the remaining 27 members of the European Union? Absolutely not. Do we want a hard border between Scotland and the remainder of the UK? Absolutely not. But that's the choice that we're going to have to face if Boris Johnson and the Tories take the UK out of the European Union on this hard Brexit, which they're talking about. Now, we didn't vote for Brexit. It's nothing. This is a situation being forced upon us, and that's why this cosy, easy decision that was maybe taken by many people in 2014, that doesn't exist anymore. Real difficult choices are going to have to be made, and what we're arguing is that the only people and the best people to make those decisions are the people who live here, work here, and call Scotland home, and that's the decision that we're going to have to be taking very, very soon.
Okay, Brendan
Gary Mulvaney, hard borders from Boris in Brexit?
Well, I mean, in terms of the UK, I don't want a border in the UK. I said earlier on, the UK and its family of nations have been probably the most successful economic and political union that's ever existed. And I'm very proud to be both Scottish and British. I mean, I know that the SNP have appropriated the saltire, but it's my flag as well. And I would rather that we actually made a decision on the 12th of December to say, look, we're actually fed up of all the constitutional stuff that's going on, and let's get back to the day-to-day job. And by voting Conservative on the 12th, you can actually make that decision. If you vote Nationalist, then you can be assured that you'll have Jeremy Corbyn, you'll have another EU referendum, you'll have at least one more Scottish referendum, if not two, because Nicola Sturgeon, was asked about that, and yes, you would probably go for a third one if you lost the second one. You would have absolute chaos. And in the meantime, the eyes off the day job. The fact that our education system is actually falling down the international rankings doesn't seem to bother. It's falling down. It doesn't seem to bother the SNP. I don't understand. The fact that our economic growth is actually lower in Scotland than the rest of the UK doesn't seem to bother, because it's a constant fixation with independence, and it's got to stop. And the people in Scotland can actually make that decision on the 12th of December and tell Nicola no means no.
Okay. Leader Balance from the Labour Party of no borders between Scotland and England, no borders between the rest of the country and Europe. What's your Labour standpoint on all this?
As I said already, I'm for less borders, not more. The kind of the wave of, and please don't take offence to this, Brendan, but the sort of nationalistic sentiment across Europe and the isolationist policies of Trump. It frightens me, and as I said, I did not come here to fight you on independence. I'm here to talk about the concerns of our community. As I say, I do not know much about trade tariffs, I must admit, but I understand your concerns, sir, about having a hard border, and I would prefer not to have one personally, but I also would like to work with our community to make sure that we have an agreement that works for everyone. If down the road, we all decide to go for independence or whatever, we'll discuss that then.
Thank you very much. Didn't think it would take till this point the night before Trump was brought up. Now, we did say the lady in the pink who's been waiting patiently, we get to ask her a question. If you mind this lady here, and then I'll come to you next, and then I'll get to the rest of them. Thank you very much. If you wouldn't mind giving us your name, tell us where you're from, and your question, please.
I'm Juliet Gill. I live in Hunters Quay. Now, I would like to direct this question mainly at Alan and Brendan. Brexit is the biggest threat to our economy. Now, in England and Wales, they've recognised that, and the Liberals, Plaid Cymru, Greens and Change UK have formed an election alliance. Has the fact that the SNP and Liberal Democrats haven't formed an alliance in Scotland handed victory to the Tory party?
Thank you very much. And let's tackle that first of all with Alan Reid. Are you handing this election on a plate to the other parties?
Oh, definitely not. I mean, the Liberal Democrats are going up in the polls. We finished second behind the Brexit Party in the European elections. We are going to win this election, and Joe Swinson will make a great Prime Minister. There is no question whatsoever of an electoral pact in Scotland between ourselves and the SNP, because we have a fundamental difference, and that's whether we believe that Scotland should remain part of the UK. I won't repeat what I said earlier about how disastrous it would be for Scotland if we left the UK, other than to say it's £2,000 of public spending for every person in Scotland, and we certainly aren't going to form an alliance with a party that's going to do that to our NHS and our education system.
Okay, Alan, can I just so I can clarify the question, are you saying tonight here in Dunoon, no pact between Liberal Democrats and SNP? That's clear tonight?
Clear, yes.
Brendan O'Hara,
yes,
SNP.
We made that clear, yes.
Oh, well,
I stand by my voting record in Parliament, and you have had the most vehement opponent of Brexit that this constituency could possibly have. There is nothing I have done to in any way facilitate or support Brexit, and I will continue to do that if re-elected. Now, it's entirely up to the Liberal Democrats if they want to approach someone and ask them if they want to go into a pact. There's no need for the SNP to go into a pact with the Liberal Democrats. I don't think, we are the party of anti-Brexit in Scotland. We are the party of Remain in Scotland. But I do take issue with Alan when he says, that we could never approach the SNP for a pact because they're a party of independence. Plaid Cymru are also a party of independence, but they went head over heels for a pact with Plaid Cymru. So I think, I will leave that to Alan to try and explain why we went to a pact with an independence party in Wales, but you don't even countenance a pact with an independence party in Scotland. But you have in me the most Remain MP that this constituency could elect, and I absolutely guarantee if re-elected you will continue to have that commitment.
Brendan Hart. Gary Mulvaney, Brexit will be bad for the Scottish economy. That's what this lady has asked.
Well, that was part of the question, and I disagree. I think Brexit is a great opportunity, and it's up to the Conservative government to both ensure we get to Brexit on the 31st of January, but also to get beyond that into another trade environment with both the European Union and with other states. So it is what we make of it. And I'm an optimist. Maybe I'm a bit like Alan, because he seems to think that Joe Swinson is going to become Prime Minister, and I probably need to get his winning lottery numbers off him tonight as well. But who's standing up? When I look at it, 19,000 people in this constituency in Argyll and Bute voted for Brexit. I voted for Brexit. I believe in Brexit.
You lost.
We want it was a UK referendum, Jim, and the majority was for leave. So if there's one person to stand up for those 19,000 people in Argyll and Bute, I would say it's the Conservatives.
Leah Barnes, coalitions and Brexit, bad for the Scottish economy.
I think it's been made clear. We were in Rothsey last night, and there was a few people who raised points about that people are worried about that, especially in terms of subsidies for our farmers. I understand, and we are offering people a Remain option on the ballot paper or a negotiated deal, so you have a choice at the end of the day. And as far as coalitions go, I'm focusing on my own campaign just now, and that's what I'll continue to focus on.
But on the subject, that it was on the subject of coalitions, unless you get landslide majority, you will need to choose one of these other parties to work with. So I think what the lady was asking was, who would it be?
Like I said, Corbyn is focusing on winning right now, and that's the view I'm taking. So I'm an optimist.
Okay, thank you very much. Lady at the front with the stop jump on. Sorry if it takes so long to get to you. We're trying to get in as many questions as we possibly can, so please, if you have a question, you get your hand in the air after the next one so that we know how many more we still have to go through. If you wouldn't mind giving us your name, tell us where you're from, and your question to our candidates, please.
I'm Siobhan, I'm from Dunoon. So, in the 2014 referendum, the No campaign said, Scotland should stay because we're a valued part of the UK. Now, I quite often watch, believe it or not, House of Commons on the telly, even though it's really boring, and I've made 3 observations. One is that Scotland's been compared to things like Lincolnshire County Council. One is that Scotland has not been given a place at the negotiating table for things to do with Brexit, even for things that really affect Scotland, like farming and fishery. But the main one is that every time the SNP seems to speak, all the Tories get up and walk out. Now, I don't know if that's just how it's edited on the telly or something, but it seems to happen quite a lot. So I've got two questions. One, do you think that's a really good way to make Scotland feel a valued part of a democracy? And number two, to Gary, if you become the MP, are you going to do the same thing and walk out every time the SNP speak and follow your colleagues like Stephen Kerr out and not listen to what the SNP have to say?
I think we'll come to Gary Mulvaney on this first. Asked Scotland to stay in 2014, but now no place at the negotiating table, as you pointed out. And getting up and leaving, would you walk out in those circumstances that have just been mentioned?
Well, I think to take the first part of the question first, in terms of negotiation, you know, it's a UK negotiation, and my understanding and what I've read is there's been extensive discussions with the Scottish Government and the devolved nations in terms of trying to pull things together into the negotiating position. But there is only one negotiator, it's the UK Government, and I think that there's a special committee being set up to allow that to happen. But of course it requires willingness on all sides to sit round that table and negotiate in an open and transparent spirit. And maybe that hasn't always been the case from the Scottish Government's point of view. You know, the other devolved administrations have taken a slightly different perspective, and that's fair enough. In terms of walking out, I mean, I've occasionally watched the House of Commons as well. I don't know what that says about me as well, but and you know, I've seen it, and strangely enough, I've never seen it actually when Brendan's necessarily been speaking. I've seen it when Ian Blackford stands up, and most people tend to walk out. But direct answer to your direct question, you know, if you're in the House of Commons, you need to hear all the debate, and you can't hear the debate outside. So I would be listening to all the debate before making a contribution, and I think that's both the right thing and the respectful thing to do.
Thank you very much, Gary Mulvaney. Alan Reid of the Liberal Democrats, I don't know if you've seen this happen on TV or not, people got up and walk away. In your time at Westminster, do you ever get up and walk out when you shouldn't have?
Definitely not. I always stayed in the chamber to hear all viewpoints. I mean, what I think is wrong with the House of Commons is the first past the post electoral system, because it means you end up with a House of Commons that doesn't reflect the country. I mean, if we had a House of Commons that properly reflected the country, we wouldn't have this Tory DUP coalition that has run the country for the past 2.5 years. We would have a much more broad-based government. And I think if we had Britain is a multi-party society, that this first past the post system that just creates the two big parties in Westminster leads to all this. One reason why it's so unruly, and that you've got these two parties, two swords lengths apart, shouting abuse at each other. We should be like the Scottish Parliament or councils, where everybody sits in a semicircle, and it's a much more collegiate approach. So I think that the answer to, the lady raised valid points, I think the answer to it is a proportional representational system, which would lead to much more cooperation in Parliament, and a Parliament that truly reflected the country.
Thank you very much, Alan Reid. Maria Barnes, like they said, much was made of Scotland, please stay. Jeremy Corbyn has said, I think today, 2021, he might consider referendum on Scottish independence. But does Labour also, do they value Scotland?
Well, I do, and I'm here tonight. I do believe, though, in the past that Scotland's voice perhaps hasn't been heard to the best it could have been, but I do agree with that. I think proportional representation would make a big difference, and we'd have a much broader spectrum and a varied, board of opinions as well, and that's so important. And as far as getting up and walking out, MPs are paid for, out in the public, that their salary comes out of the public purse at the end of the day, so you should be sitting there listening to that debate at the end of the day. And it's a debating chamber, so how can you partake in the debate if you walk out? So I wouldn't myself.
Thank you very much, Ria Barnes. Brendan O'Hara, Gary Mulvaney said he's never seen anyone walk out when you're speaking, but have you seen what the lady talked about happen?
Yeah, you see it time and again, it's almost become a piece of pantomime, a piece of theatre in which they indulge. And it's not just Ian, it's whoever's leading for the SNP. The way Parliament works is government lead, opposition lead, there'll be a second on the government side, and then it'll come to the third party. And so everyone stays for the three main speeches, and then almost choreographed this piece of pantomime. They all shuffle out and talk and chunter away to themselves, and the speaker will have to get Joanna or Ian or Patrick or Stephen to sit down while the chamber calms down and quiets down and start again. And it's a display of contempt. There's no other way of describing it. It is premeditated, and it's become, as I say, this piece of theatre, and it is to show nothing but contempt. And you are absolutely right. When you look back to what we were told in 2014, when you couldn't get enough of them telling, stay and lead the UK. We're a family of nations. You're respected, you're loved, you're wanted. You squeak over the line with a no vote in 2014, and the first thing that happens, 6 o'clock in the morning, David Cameron pitches up the streets of Downing Street, the door of Downing Street, and says, I'm introducing English votes for English laws, and Scottish MPs are regarded as second-class citizens. And the writing was on the wall. They thought they had beaten us in 2014. They thought we were back in our box in 2014. And they were wrong. We are absolutely not back in our box. And had we been back in our box, then the latest opinion poll on Scottish independence wouldn't be 50-50. And this country is on a journey, it's on a move it will inevitably lead to Scottish independence, and we can have that fairer, more equitable society as an independent member of the European Union.
Before we take the next question, could I have a show of hands of who else wants to put a question tonight, just so that I can get a rough idea of how much more time we're possibly going to need. Might not get around every one of you, but I'll try my best to get around as many as I can. Gentleman in the green jumper has been patiently waiting. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I'm originally from Manchester. I live in Ellen, stay there now. And like the first chap, it is the best place in the world to live, there's no doubt. Wonderful place, Argyll View. My question is about referendums, particularly. The question really is, why do we have them if we're not going to implement them? And I'm thinking in terms of Scottish independence on the one side, and I'm thinking in terms of Brexit on the other. Should referendums be respected and implemented? That's where we're going.
Thank you for your question. So referendums, it's been a lot of them recently, hasn't there? One up here, and we want another one. One that's happened for Brexit, and we want another one. Gary Mulvaney, referendums, are these actually a good idea? Now, it was, obviously, David Cameron who had the referendum on Brexit. So, are these a good idea, or should we just leave this up to the politicians?
No, we should respect the people. And where you've got a binary choice, and we saw the binary choice, on 3 occasions with the voting system, Scottish independence, and the EU, then it's quite right and proper that you give that to the people. The question is then, if you're going to have the referendum, then you need to respect the result. You cannot do anything else, because if you don't respect the result, you don't respect the people that have taken part in that. And that's when you've got a breakdown in democracy. So if the politicians agree, and in terms of the EU referendum, there was something like 500 MPs in favour of an EU referendum. I'm sure those at the time thought they were going to win it. But the people came to a different view. And actually, the people read the literature. I remember the literature that went out by the UK government, paid by all the taxpayers, and I remember the words that said, we will respect the result, whatever it shall be. And that's what we need to do. So in terms of the Scottish referendum, that was a once in a generation referendum. I know you're frustrated as I am, because I thought a generation was much longer than 5 years. But yeah, I get your frustration. And in a sense, we've had the EU referendum. We need to respect the results of referendum, and we need to implement them. And to me, that is as clear as you can make.
Thank you very much, Gary. If I can turn to Alan Reid of the Liberal Democrats, we should honour the result. Gary Mulvaney says the Lib Dems want to cancel Brexit, don't they?
Yes, that's correct. Well, we're seeking a mandate in this election to cancel Brexit. Referendums have their place. Elections have their place. Elections and referendums are both democratic choices. So if a party puts into its manifesto that it will carry out a particular course of action and it then wins an overall majority in that election, it has a democratic mandate to carry out that choice. And we've been perfectly clear, if you vote Liberal Democrat in this election, you are voting to cancel Brexit. If we win an overall majority, that's exactly what we will do. And we will certainly not have another independence referendum. We were promised it would be once a generation. So I think probably around about 2044 is the earliest at which we should be even considering another independence referendum. But it should be noted that actually no party is actually standing in this election on a platform of implementing the EU referendum. The question on the ballot paper was, should the UK leave the European Union? The Conservatives are not going to take the EU out of the European Union. They're going to leave Northern Ireland within the European Union. So Gary can talk all he likes about the integrity of referendums and implementing the result. He is not planning to implement the result of the referendum.
Thank you very much, Alan Reid. Leah Barnes, Labour would like us to vote again on the result of the referendum. Are you sticking by that, yeah?
I am. I know we're all fed up of going to the ballot box, and I get it. But it's such an important... Brexit is so important for this community, and people need to have another say on it. As far as the integrity of a referendum, I do think we should stick by what and go by what the people decide. However, with Brexit, I feel that there was so much going on with certain words put on certain buses and issues with funding as well for the campaigns. So I do believe that there was things were not as they should have been. And when it comes to the independence one, as I said, we had that, and I feel that was the outcome of that should be respected. But in terms of Brexit, I do think there was just too much going on there. We need to make sure that people have the choice between either a Remain option or the negotiated deal. We're trying to give, we're trying to make sure that just people have that choice at the end of the day. Thank you.
Yeah. But on that, Jeremy Corbyn has said 2021 another Scottish independence referendum. So Brendan O'Hara from the SNP, once in a generation.
Well, what once in a generation? It's interesting. I was listening to somebody the other day and they said, of course it was once in a generation, but that's not the same thing as making it a manifesto promise. It's a description, not a promise. That was Alistair Carmichael last month talking live on Top Radio about Nick Clegg saying that the EU was once in a generation. So let's not get bogged down the fact that this party leader said it was once in a generation during a campaign, or that party leader said it was once in a generation. The people will decide when they want another referendum. It's not up to politicians or governments to tell the people what their priorities are. The people will decide their priorities, and when the people say that we want a change, then they should have the right to make that change. And the idea that my 14-year-old daughter, as she was in 2014, would have to wait until she's a 43-year-old woman before she can get another vote on the future of our country is frankly ludicrous. It's a ridiculous idea, Alan. Scotland voted to remain in the European Union. Scotland voted overwhelmingly. The people of Argyll and Bute voted to remain in the European Union. No question about it. I stood in 2017 saying I will do nothing to facilitate or help Brexit, and I will do everything I can to keep Scotland and the UK in the European Union, and I was elected. So don't talk to me about implementing decisions. This was our decision. Every single part of Scotland voted to remain. Argyll and Bute voted to remain. And if you want somebody who will vote for the economic ruination of Argyll and Bute, then vote for Gary, because that is the surefire way of ruining the economy of Argyll and Bute. Brexit will be catastrophic for this constituency.
I was going to ask some more questions from the editor of the Dunoon Observer tonight, but we're actually over the time that we've been allotted already. But I'm going to ask for the good grace to ask maybe just one more question, if that would be okay. Okay, fair enough. Okay, so I know there was more than 2 people who desperately wanted to speak tonight. If you could stick your hands in the air, those who have been patiently waiting all night tonight to ask a question. I think we're going to go for the gentleman at the back. I don't know what that is you're holding on your hand. The gentleman at the back there, and I'll decide which one of these 2 gentlemen it will be in just a moment as well. So but keep the questions as brief as you can, please. Candidates, keep your answers as brief as you can as well.
Ian Wright from Kim. Given that global warming is the biggest challenge globally, I would like to see what each individual member of the panel would put and cost it in individual terms for each individual in the country. How much are they willing to put into global warming, and how much at the same time does leaving the EU cost individuals in the country, and how much does it cost Scottish people for leaving England?
Thank you very much. We'll try and sum that up as quickly as we possibly can. We're looking for a price per person for climate change, price per person for leaving the EU, and what was the other one? Just quickly. Okay. So very quickly, Alan Reid, Liberal Democrats, climate change, price per person in this country.
Well, Brexit would cost the country 50 billion, that's £1,000 for each person. Independence is even worse, it would cost each person £2,000 a year every year. But rather than debating Brexit and independence, climate change is the most important. We have to spend whatever it takes to stop climate change. The world is facing economic catastrophe. We have to spend money on renewable energy, on insulation, on moving to electric cars, on recycling. We have to spend what it takes, because that is the real issue facing our planet.
Thank you very much, Alan. Maria Barnes from Labour. Price per person for Brexit, climate change, all those questions we were asked.
I think it really depends where you are on the socio-economic scale, how badly you're going to be affected by Brexit. I think if you're in the very privileged few that can insulate yourself, it's not going to cost you very much. But honestly, I couldn't, and that's what scares me. I can't put a figure on an individual how much it's going to cost, because, I refer to Alan's figures, but I think it could be far worse, to be honest. In terms of the climate change, sir, that is front and centre of Labour's manifesto. We are pushing the Green Deal, investment in green energy and jobs for life as well. It is something we haven't got, I haven't got my hand right now, the actual costing for it, but that will be published in the manifesto on Friday in the grey book that comes along with that. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much, Maria Barnes. Brendan O'Hara for the SNP. Green economy, Green Deal, surrounded in Argyll and Bute by these things. Which one's most important? Climate change, Brexit, the costings. Where do you stand on this?
Well, you cannot work in silos. Everything works across everything else. And in terms of climate change, costs, it's impossible to say. You'd be well working out how many zeros you can stick in the side of a bus. But the cost of climate change is the planet. The cost of not addressing climate change is our children and our grandchildren's future. So you cannot put a monetary value on that. And it's incumbent on every single one of us. We have a moral responsibility to our children and our grandchildren and to future generations to stop what we're doing. And the biggest depressing thing we have at the moment is that we are now having to fight the fights that we had and thought we'd won 15 years ago. The Trump election in America has been catastrophic for the climate change movement. The ripping up of the Paris Agreement and his fossil fuel policy is going to be a disaster, and we have to stop that. Everything we can to stop that.
Okay, Brendan Hart, thank you very much. Gavin, finally on this, cost of independence, cost of climate change?
Okay, I know you want me to be brief. Brexit is an opportunity, not a cost. Independence, too big a price to pay. Too big a price to pay for me. Climate change is the most important one. It's the most serious one. And the Conservatives are fully signed up to the CO2 carbon target zero by 2045, which is part of the Scottish Government's bill that went through. We approved of that, and it's the biggest challenge. And I think that we saw last week in terms of flooding down south and parts of the Midlands, how changing our climate is. And it's not just the floods that happen at the time, it's the cost to repair that and the time it takes to do that and the fact that people won't get insurance, etc., etc. So climate change is the biggest crisis that we face, and we're going to have to get international action on this. There's no point in us, for example, in Argyll and Bute.
I do need to stop moving this on very quickly. So final point.
Okay. What I was going to say is there's no point in us doing a job in Argyll and Bute, doing a job in the UK, if China, India and the rest...
The gentleman there with the blue jacket on who's been here since the place opened tonight. No, that's you, yes. If you give us your final question, please keep it right there, sorry, right at the front row. Just right there. Put your hand there, please. Keep your question brief, please, and again to the candidates. We want to hear a bit more from you before we finish, so if you could keep your answers as brief as possible, that would be great.
You're Hamilton from Dunoon. What if there's a Parliament, who would the candidates go in coalition with?
I think we already covered that just a little bit earlier on, so just before we go, this gentleman here, I'll refer you to the answer. You'll be able to see the answer in this week's print edition of the Dunoon Observer. That very question was answered, so final question here, please.
Hi there, Lucky McQuarrie from Kilmun. Seeing as we are the 5th biggest economy in the world, we've been going through cuts for the last 10 years. Is it worth it that we've got 4 million children living under the poverty line?
Final question of the night, Gary Mulvaney, poverty.
No, it's not acceptable that we've got children in poverty, and as I suppose you need to understand the causes of why we had times of austerity, and the fact was quite simple, was that we spent far too much money in the early part of the 2000 decade, ran up the national debt, ended up with an unsustainable level of public expenditure and had to deal with it. Now, you cannot be in a situation where you constantly max out your credit card and there's no consequences. So unfortunately, we had to pick up the mess from Labour, and we had to come in 2010. We had to pick up the mess from Labour, we had to come in 2010 and sort it out. And that's what happens to every Conservative government when there's a Labour government being in before it. They've got to sort out their mess.
Okay, we could just count down for just 1 second, Gary Mulvaney, thank you. Ria Barnes, all your fault. Not your fault, actually, but the Labour Party's fault.
Has the national debt not tripled? We've got 7,246 people struggling with universal credit. Our welfare system has been stripped to the bone, and I know it's not a direct question about the NHS, but that comes into it as well, because the two it's a symbiotic relationship. When one fails, so does the other. We haven't got enough public services, we haven't got enough support in our communities. We really need to put more money back into welfare. We are willing to do that. We will scrap universal credit and we will make sure that people have dignity.
Thank you very much. Millions of children living in poverty.
poverty in this year?
Austerity was a con.
Yeah.
Austerity was a political choice. Poverty is not inevitable. Poverty is a direct result of political choices. And if you decide to make the holes in the social security net wider, families and children will fall through into poverty. If you make the poorest and the weakest and the most vulnerable pay for the obscene obsesses of the banks, then poverty inevitably follows. So no matter how you want to try and spin this, poverty is a direct result of the austerity policies brought in 2010 in the coalition government.
You've got welfare powers.
Please,
you've got welfare powers.
Poverty is a direct result of what was brought in 2010 with the coalition government. That is an inescapable fact. Working families living in poverty in a country as rich as the United Kingdom is an absolute disgrace. And isn't it remarkable how Boris Johnson has found the fabled magic money tree when it suits him? Don't be conned again. Okay, so austerity was a con.
We have to keep What will the Lib Dems do about this?
Well, I think I always feel that the most important drive to end poverty is education. It's through education that we can improve the skills of our population and help to take people out of poverty. But also we have to look at the social security system, and that is jointly managed these days by the Scottish Government and the UK government. Both have powers, except the Scottish Government just refuses to use them and allows they refuse to use the powers they've got and allow the Tories to get away with whatever they want to do.
Listen, we've let everyone else speak, so let's let our last candidate speak.
Reverse the changes that the Tories have made since they went into government on their own. We would end the two child rule for child benefit that actually creates the rape clause. Women should get the tax credits without this outrage, and we would also put more money into universal credit. There's nothing actually wrong with universal credit as a system. It's all the cuts the Tories have made to it that have caused.
Thank you very much, Alan Reid from Liberal Democrats. Now, after tonight's round of questions, quite passionate answers from our candidates, if you're still unsure who deserves your vote now, on Thursday, the 12th of December, we're going to allow each candidate a further 2 minutes to speak to you tonight and appeal for your vote come election day. And starting off this evening, your final 2 minutes, Ria Barnes, who's the candidate this year for the Labour Party.
Thank you. I appreciate again you all coming out tonight. Please consider what we are putting forward. We have a fantastic manifesto. It's forward thinking, it's innovative. We're going to put money back into our communities. We're going to help the most vulnerable. I appreciate there is a desire for independence. I do get that, but I want to deal with our community issues now. There shouldn't be people sleeping on our streets. There shouldn't be people struggling under universal credit. We will fix that, and we will make sure that everyone has what they need to get on in life and has a fair chance. So please, I would urge you to vote Labour on December the 12th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next to the Conservatives, Gary Mulvaney.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to the audience for a very, very fair hearing. I hope I managed to raise your blood pressure a little bit there. I think anybody looks at it, there's going to be two outcomes in terms of this election. That's generally accepted. There's either going to be a Conservative majority government, or there's going to be a hung Parliament likely to be led by Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister. A Conservative majority government will be able to stop Brexit, stop Nicola Sturgeon's independence referendum, move us back to our priorities, and get us back to some degree of normality. The alternative is very clear. It's gridlock. It's what we've had for the last 2 years. It's a minority government with Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister, supported by the SNP and others. And just imagine Jeremy Corbyn as your Prime Minister. Just imagine John McDonnell as your Chancellor. Just remember the company they keep as well. And of course, just remember the billions and billions of pounds that they're going to spend. Just imagine our national security in the hands of Jeremy Corbyn. And then just imagine the power being given to Nicola Sturgeon to have another independence referendum. So it's a two-horse race here in Argyll, and it's dead clear. I know this audience wants independence. They're all your nationalists. I get that, and that's fine. But it is a two-horse race, and you can either vote for me as a Conservative candidate, or you can vote for Brendan.
Conservative Party. And now let's hear from Brendan O'Hara from the SNP.
Thank you. And again, like all the candidates, thank you for coming out in such huge numbers on what is a miserable night. Scotland's future is at stake in this election. It's that important. As I said earlier on, we're at a crossroads in Scotland. We've got to decide which route we take. Do we stay with an isolationist UK, cut off from Europe and our European friends and partners, led by a man who modelled himself on Donald Trump and who will do whatever he has to do to secure a trade deal with America, and the catastrophic consequences that that will have for our shellfish industry, for our tourism industry and our farming industry. We will deny ourselves access to the very people that we need to encourage to come and live and work and raise a family here in Argyll and Bute. There's a way of stopping it, and that way is remaining within the European Union as an independent, democratic state, and that's what is on offer here. So there are essentially two choices. You go down the road that Gary's invited you to go down, with this Trump-led, isolationist, right-wing United Kingdom, or we have a future within the European Union as a democratic state, an equal democratic state, and that's why, when it comes to December the 12th, I implore you to take your future into your hands and deliver a better Scotland for you, your children and your grandchildren.
On the 12th of December, would you please a round of applause for Albert from the Liberal Democrats?
On 12th of December, you have a choice. You can vote Liberal Democrat and Brexit stops on 13th December. Or you can vote Tory or SNP, in which case you will spend years and years continuing to argue about Brexit and about independence. And look at the financial consequences. Brexit costs everybody in the country £1,000. Independence, even worse. Cost everybody in Scotland £2,000 a year, every year. That is a dramatic cut in people's living standards and our public services. We should be concentrating on the real issue facing the planet, that's climate change and the threat of environmental catastrophe. We should be working together to tackle that instead of all the divisions of Brexit and independence. I was a Member of Parliament here for 14 years. When Liberal Democrats slumped in the opinion polls, I lost the seat. Liberal Democrats are now back at the same level in the opinion polls as we were when I held this seat. So I can take this seat back on the 12th of December. Liberal Democrats can win the general election on the 12th of December. Let's, instead of spending money on Brexit and independence, let's spend it on the NHS, on childcare, combating climate change. And on a local issue, if you were to elect me as your MP, I would be demanding proper ferries on that route. We've got our economy here in Dunoon is being strangled by the appalling, total, complete incompetence of the SNP, having those bathtub votes on that route for 8 years now, and no promise of anything new. Let's get the ferries sorted. Vote Liberal Democrat, stop Brexit, stop independence, like public services sorted out, tackle climate change, vote Liberal Democrat for a better future.
Thank you very much, Alan Reid. I almost thought there was a slip of the tongue there as well, but I might have to apologise to everyone who's watching tonight. Well, you've now heard what the candidates have to say, and it's over to you now to vote. Which one of these candidates will get an early Christmas present from the voter? Full reaction and analysis will be in this Friday's print edition of the Dunoon Observer newspaper. You can also watch these hustings again tonight when you head home. Thank you very much to our team at democracylive.scot. They will put this up on YouTube for you to see, or you can listen to the repeat show on Dunoon Community Radio later on this weekend. My thanks to the Dunoon Observer for organising tonight's hustings, and to the Burgh Hall for letting us do that. But most of all, thanks to you for attending tonight and putting the candidates through their paces. For those who never plucked up the courage tonight to put your MP on the spot, you can come up to the front later on. Some of them have decided they may or may not stick about and take a few questions from you. And tonight, thankfully, I can say to our candidates something I've been wanting to say here for a while. May the best man or woman win. And finally, before we go, I did promise those watching at home that I would do this tonight before we left. There's a camera that's been pointed at the back of my head for the past hour and a half. I did promise our producer that we would all turn in an orderly fashion and give a wave to everyone behind us who's watching at home. So, from the Burgh Hall, here in Dunoon, unite!
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much to you all for coming out. Thank you to the Hall staff, thank you to the candidates, and thank you to Derek for chairing the event so expertly. Thank you and good night.